Welcome on into BKL Nightly. This is the Let's Talk Ball edition. I'm Thad Brown. He is Carl Jones. Every single week, we break down the X's and the O's, go back to the All-22 film. A lot to talk about today. Bills and Chiefs and trade deadline. And it just got completed as Carl and I are coming on the air to record this today. And Carl, the Bills do absolutely nothing. And for me, that was surprise number one. I thought for sure Brandon Beane, with the different positions that he could go, would add something at the trade deadline. To be fair, it takes two to tango, as they always say. But what was your reaction to what the Bills did, or more importantly, did not do at this trade deadline?
I'm surprised they didn't go after a defensive lineman, whether it was at edge or D tackle, just based off of the bodies they've lost at that spot. Obviously, Ed Oliver out for the foreseeable future. Michael Hoyt out for the year. Daquan Jones will practice this week. Sean McDermott said yesterday, but we still don't know when he's officially going to be active and playing. But I thought they could have used one more body. Now, if you are the Bills, you'll say, we're going to get TJ Sanders back at some point. We are going to get Daquan back. And then we're going to play it by committee out there on the edge like we were before Michael Hoyt was available. So I get it from that perspective, but I thought one more body up front would help shore everything up. This isn't to say they couldn't get a similar type of asset or player, on the waivers, because this time of year players get released and it will be more of a depth guy at that position. Wide receiver, the more we thought about it, we kept talking on this platform, it just seemed like they either had to go big or go home, and none of the high-profile receivers got moved. So from that perspective, it doesn't shock me too much they didn't get at least a receiver.
I think the conclusion that you're kind of dancing around there, that the market was not something that helped the Bills out, I think is probably the right answer. I'm still surprised they didn't add somebody, because you're right. You can go through that D-line depth chart and say, well, you know what? The Bills still have Bosa and Epinesa and Rousseau and Javon Solomon on the edge, and they're going to get Daquan and TJ Sanders back. Now, we don't know when Sanders is coming back, but at some point, so you have those two guys. You have Jordan Phillips and Deion Walker and Ogunjobi. So you've got bodies to fill out a depth chart. And to be honest, the way Joey Bosa's played, you're not even too much problematic in terms of what you have at the top. But, boy, if someone else gets hurt, what are you doing then? Now, Fedarian Mathis is playing every single game, and you don't want to roll into January with that. So I think that's the biggest surprise for me with this. Real quick, because they're in the division, and it was just bonkers headlines what happened. The Jets trade away two superstars, Sauce Gardner, Quinnen Williams. Give me your take real quick on the Jets and or the trade deadline as a whole.
One, I love what the Colts did. Lou Anarumo is a funky defensive coordinator, so I love getting Sauce in there. You have Sauce, Mooney Ward, and Kenny Moore at cornerback. I can't wait to see all the creative stuff he does. From the Jets perspective, I get it where they maybe don't view him as that type of player in their specific system. They play a lot of man in your face, and Sauce is more of a zone guy where he can use some of his length from that perspective. So I get it. I don't personally like trading high asset players at premium positions, but if they don't think he's a system fit, then you do that move. And then Quinnen Williams, I think you make that move 10 times out of 10, considering the fact that they're going to get a pick in the 2027 draft, which for all you who do not follow college football is projected to be one of those ones. It's supposed to be, you guys know who Jeremiah Smith is, right? He's just one of like 10 other guys who are going to come out in that class. So I get getting an asset that in that year's draft, unloading a guy who I believe is going to be 28 next year.
I'm totally with you on the Quinnen Williams move. I think that one was, I don't want to say a no-brainer, but that's probably an easy yes for the Jets. The Sauce one in a vacuum is harder. And, you talk about that 2027 draft being the thing. Can you imagine trying to sell to Jets fans that this is all going to work? All you got to do is wait 24 months. I'm sure that's going to go over great. But I do, at least from that point of view, understand the move. All right, let's move on to the Bills and the Chiefs. And normally we start on offense, but the story of this game was the defense, and in particular, Cole Bishop. And you and I have talked on this podcast many times about how you watch a game and it's never as bad or as good as it might seem, that it usually regresses to the middle. Carl, this is one of the few times where I walked away from a game thinking that guy played well, turned the film on, and watched all the other players where I didn't notice him and thought that he played even better.
Yeah, he was phenomenal. And what's most impressive, and I've talked about it on my X feed, so go check it out, is that he did it from a multitude of spots. He did it at the nickel spot, which he played a lot in the first half. He played the safety position where he would roll down at the snap, and then he also was a center field safety and made plays from that position as well. In the draft, Cole Bishop out of Utah was a guy who was best closest to the line of scrimmage. But the idea was, because he's so athletic, you can turn him into something more. Now, before Sunday night, you really were like, just see the box safety stuff. I don't really see some of the stuff where he has to use his range. And it was on full display against the Chiefs, whether it was that great fourth down stop where he got the PBU on Rashee Rice, whether it was running across the formation and getting a PBU on Xavier Worthy, whether it was the play where I know Max Harrison picked it off, but the baseball turn, looking like the boy from the Dodgers the other day, and getting on top of that route on top of Xavier Worthy. All of that stuff is so cool to see, and he's gotten better as the game's going. And he's had his dips. Young players are expected. But if they can get that type of player in the secondary, Lord have mercy, the Bills have definitely found a player that can last on that defense for a very long time.
I like what you say about the creativity, too. That using him in the nickel, which they only did, I think, 4 or 5 times, but they used it twice on the drive that the Chiefs stopped and turned into a field goal. Remember, the first 2 drives, Chiefs go 3 and out to open, but then a touchdown drive where they rolled down the field. And on that field goal drive, they had a couple big plays. It looked like this was going to be the Chiefs just dominating. The Bills move Cole Bishop to the nickel. He stops a second down play, stops a third down play. They're off the field. Then they follow up the third and the fourth down play were both Cole Bishop plays. The ability to use him in the nickel, and let's not understate the ability to take Cam Lewis and drop him back to safety. Because if you have Taron Johnson out there playing in that nickel spot, it's harder to move him back to safety. You could do it, but Cam Lewis knows the position a little bit more. So Cole Bishop deserves a lion's share of the credit for making all those plays. But I like what Sean McDermott, we assume now, did creatively to use the bodies at his disposal in this game.
Yeah, you talking about McDermott and Babbage back there on the.
It's more McDermott, I think, at this point. It's some level in there somewhere.
But that's what you're able to do when you take a player who has high athletic profiles. And I get people will say, "Oh, I want football players," and I think you want a football player first, and then you worry about the traits later. But if you can coach a guy up who has that raw profile of being a really good athlete, he can tackle, just has bad L's when he misses. But when he's that rangy, you're like, ooh, we can do some funky stuff with him. And I think the Taron Johnson point is important. Taron is a very good player, but I don't know how funky the game plan looks, or you can go if Taron is at the nickel, because now Cole is staying at safety the entire game, and maybe some of those, or maybe that dime look where Cole can come down for Jamarcus Ingram and then Cam Lewis comes in for Cole. Whatever the case may be, I just want to give Cole his flowers. He played phenomenal, and I know some people are like, oh, this is Jordan Poyer's doing, all these guys. I get it. I'm sure there's some credit to that. I want to give credit to the man in the arena, and shout out to Cole Bishop for having his best game as a Buffalo Bill.
There's a part of this where it takes a village, but for sure the guy's got to make the plays. Before we totally get off of Cole Bishop, I want you to lay out why it's reasonable to say Cole Bishop on the Max Harrison interception might deserve more credit than Max did, even though he made the catch. Heck of a play, but explain why 24 was so important on that play.
Yeah, so the Chiefs had 2 speed coming at them. They had 2 verticals coming right down the pipe, and the Bills had a bit of a 3-deep look. So it was Cole Bishop in the deep center field. Max was obviously the other one. I forget who the corner was on the other side of the field. But once Patrick Mahomes sees Cole Bishop turn his body to the middle of the field, he's like, bingo, we got action. We got Xavier Worthy on the other side. And because of that, Max Harrison's just doing his job and just running back like whatever. I'm just floating back here, doing my 111, staying the deepest of the deep. But because of the fact that Cole gave him that look where he's like, you know what, you think I'm going middle, but I see Xavier Worthy out the corner of my eye. And then staying on top of it with the baseball turn. You've watched enough ball. You know how difficult it is. As a safety, it is really hard, or a DB in general, to baseball turn and not lose speed. That's why I call it a baseball turn, because those are the guys who do it best. Usually when you turn back to the quarterback and you do a baseball turn or speed turn, you slow down a bit. So the fact that he was able to stay on top of the fastest guy we've seen at the combine in history, super duper impressive play. When I saw it, I ran it back, then ran it back again, and then I ran it back. I forgot even Max picked it off. That's how impressive a play it was.
All right, let's not totally dismiss Max because he had a good game too. But with Hairston, you go back and look at the film. He only played half the snaps. Kind of similar to Carolina. The Chiefs didn't really test him a whole lot, but he did step for step with Xavier Worthy, and he did make the interception, which certainly is some credit to him too. Give me your take on Max Hairston game 2.
Yeah, it wasn't something otherworldly, but I thought there were a couple of instances where I say, you allow your defense to do this because you got a guy who's super athletic out there. That play where he's running step for step with Xavier Worthy, if that's Trey White or any other cornerback, I don't know if you want to give the press man look with 2 guys on the far side of the field, because you don't trust that corner to stay on top of it. You would just tell him to back off because the receiver's going to run right past you. So the fact that you have a defensive coordinator who trusts a corner with a 4.2 speed to say, hey, I trust you to press this because you're going to stay on top of anything with those freakish gifts. I've been in rooms where DC said, you know what? that dude across from you he's going to run track in the Olympics one day. I need you to back up, stay 7 yards off. Forget the disguise. We don't want to get beat over the top. The Bills were able to disguise man on that play and drop into cover 3 because they have a guy who can run a 10-1 in the track and field. So that is super impressive in terms of how they see his attributes and utilizing them on Sundays.
The only thing I want to see with Max Hairston is more. You know, we've had 2 half games out of him. There hasn't been many opportunities where he's been tested. Obviously, Carolina with Andy Dalton is its own kind of, non-threatening animal. So just give me more. Give me, I don't know if the Dolphins will be it this week, but certainly you would think the Bucs after that, will be the kind of team that can threaten a number 2 corner. One other thing in the secondary I want to get to. I don't think we talk nearly enough about the job Cam Lewis did in that game coming out of Sunday. He was so good on film. How many times did he lock up Travis Kelce? Granted, it's not Pete Kelce, but that's still a big man out there that you got to deal with when you're, 5 foot nothing, 100 and nothing. And you talked about Taron Johnson and the creativity that you don't have when he's out there. Taron Johnson has not had his best year. I am the biggest fan in the world of Taron Johnson. But, Carl, there were parts of me watching the Cam Lewis game and thinking, is it time to maybe give Cam Lewis more opportunity in the slot? If only because if you get near the same production as you're getting from Taron, which in this one game I think there's an argument to be made, and then you can flex him to other positions, he might be more valuable.
I think the pushback on that is that they played a team that is super pass heavy, so you didn't miss having a nickel in there that is great against the run. I think when you play, not most teams, but yeah, most teams aren't as pass happy as the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs are in terms of neutral pass rate are like either first or second in the NFL. So you can get away with your nickel not being a guy who can play in the box at all because they're not going to run the ball. Like the Chiefs ran the ball well and they just abandoned it for whatever reason. So I think that's the benefit of having Taron out there is that he can be a quasi linebacker in those looks. But no, kudos to Cam Lewis. He stepped up at 2 positions against a team that was rolling on all cylinders, different body types. One play is Travis Kelce, another time is a wide receiver. That's super impressive in his own right.
Let's move on to the defensive line real quick. Ed Oliver out. How do the Bills replace him? Well, in this game, it was Jordan Phillips. Not every play, but Jordan Phillips was the guy that took away that end of the first half drive. He made the run stop, or he had the penetration that led to the run stop, and then he had a pressure. I think it might have been his only quarterback pressure of the game, but the fact he's in Pat Mahomes' face on second down prevents him from seeing Travis Kelce standing by himself at the goal line for the duration of the play. So at least in this game, the Bills got something from Jordan Phillips at defensive tackle. Also at D tackle, I want to talk about Deion Walker just for a minute. He hasn't been as good as he was the first month of the year. There hasn't been as many splash plays, and he's still getting pushed around a little too much in the run game. He's still fine, and I think the Bills are okay what they're getting out of a 4th-round pick year 1. But give me your take, defensive line, anything you notice. We haven't talked about Joey Bosa yet. We should bring him up at some point here too. But at least the front 4 and what the Bills got out of that group against the Chiefs.
Yeah, we've talked about this back and forth off air since the game's concluded. When I watched it live, I'm like, oh, the secondary. Then I watched it back the next time. I'm like, oh, I think the D-line. The more I settle on it, the secondary and the coverage on the back end probably gets the most credit for how they performed. The defensive line played phenomenal. Don't get it twisted. Obviously, you guys have probably seen the stat where Pat Mahomes was pressured on 53% of his dropbacks, which is the most in this rivalry over the past 10 meetings since 2020. Having said that, though, they had a specific rush plan where they played him like he was Lamar. They just muddied the pocket and just said, we're going to compress everything and not allow you to leave. So that's why some of the pressure numbers are somewhat skewed because, as you know, if you're just near the quarterback within like a yard and a half or radius or whatever, it registers as a pressure. But Joey Bosa was one of the guys who was winning clean, though. Like, he was a bullying Juwan Taylor at some point. And then Jalen Moore, poor him. I know he signed a lot of money in his offseason, so not poor him, but he looked like a backup. And Joey Bosa took advantage of that. So I do want to give the D-line credit for executing the game plan. They had a specific game plan. We're going to crush the pocket. You guys win. You better win clean and early. But they kept Patrick Mahomes in check all game long.
Part of that, too, was game script, and things got skewed at the end. For example, the way I track pressures is if you impact the quarterback, you get a pressure. So I don't do that yard and a half thing. I don't like it.
Right.
My pressure chart had the Bills with 9 pressures through 3 quarters and then 10 in the 4th quarter. And of those 9, 3 of them were coverage-based too. So only 6 clean, actual, less than 3-second quarterback pressures. The other number to keep in mind, I've been throwing this around all week on different shows. Joey Bosa had 5 quarterback hits, which sounds awesome. Well, 3 of them were in the last 6 snaps of the game that he played on defense. So this thing, the D-line played well. Again, to the way you say it, don't get it twisted. But their numbers got shined up quite a bit with the way that game ended and the game situation the Chiefs were in. So don't take too much out of, wow, Joey Bosa has arrived. It was good. It might not have been that good. One more point on defense to hit before we go to the offensive side of the ball. Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano did play in the game. I did see snap charts for them saying that they had numbers. But outside of that, there was not much they contributed. And as we went back and forth on texting yesterday, he was the guy that was primarily responsible for the 4th and 17 fail. Not a good day for either one of those 2 linebackers.
Yeah, Milano has had games this year where I thought he's flashed. The game he got hurt in, forget which game he left
Atlanta?
At halftime.
I think it was Atlanta, yeah. Or
He
no,
was-
either one of the 2 losses. But
New England. It was New England because Terrell got hurt in Atlanta. I thought Milano has had flashes where he's looked good. TB has been bled most of the year, just very invisible, I guess I'd say. I know he had the interception late in the Dolphins game, but he's just been very bled. Now, some of this has to do with the fact they played so much dime. So they had 6 defensive backs out there, so there weren't a lot of opportunities for the linebackers to make plays. But, I mean, when they were out there, I didn't notice it. And if I did, it wasn't in a positive light.
Part of that, too, is a reflection on what the defensive tackles have done all year. Noah Oliver, you've got young guys you're counting up in the middle. They're not occupying blocks enough. Larry Ogunjobi, I thought he was good against the pass in this game, but he has been virtually ineffective against the run. When those guys are not occupying blocks, then invisible is exactly what Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano are going to be. Let's go to the offensive side of the ball. And the Bills scored 28 points on what we think is a pretty good defense. And I walked away from that film thinking, who really stood out and played well? Like above average. There's a lot of guys did their job. And the only person I really landed on was Joe Brady, who I thought had a number of good wrinkles. The Bills did a great job targeting number 23, Drew Tranquil in this game. They abused him, Dalton Kincaid in particular. A couple good wrinkles. But, Carl, I thought the game plan, and we'll get to the one big knock I have out in a minute, I thought the game plan was very, very good for Joe Brady in this one.
Yeah, going into this game, the Chiefs' biggest weakness was right up the middle, right up Broadway. The linebackers weren't great in coverage, and then their safeties weren't much of that either. And they were able to punish them with those big 22 personnel, those 21 personnel looks, with Reggie Gilliam and Jackson Hawes looking like quasi-left guards and right tackles the way they were blocking in the run game. And then when the Chiefs were trying to stop the run, coming up and flying downhill, they were able to hit them right over the top. That Dawson Knox play comes to mind, as well as Jackson Hayes. So I do want to give credit to Joe Brady and, once again, our favorite 2 guys on this show, Jackson Hawes and Reggie Gilliam, for how they handled those guys up front. But we talked about this. I noticed it during the game. We talked about it after the game. And then I mentioned it again during our text messages. Joe Brady had the sniper out on number 23 for the Chiefs, their linebacker, Drew Tranquil. And basically, he's going to find 10 different ways to take advantage of him, whether it was the touchdown, the first drive of the game to Dalton Kincaid, whether it was the mesh route to Khalil Shakir where Drew Tranquil ran into someone else, and Khalil Shakir had a big game up the left sideline. He found so many different ways to take advantage of him, and that's kudos and good coaching from the Bills OC.
We talk about, or at least I talked about, how it didn't feel like there was a player who stood out. Because in large part, the Bills got to do mostly everything they wanted in this game. That's a credit to Joe Brady, too. This was a game, and you said it, I'm going to steal your phrase to set you up for it, though. This was a game the Bills, both sides of the ball, but I think you saw it most often on offense. They played this game on their terms for 60 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, think about the struggles they've had in that Patriots game, the Atlanta game, and some of the relative struggles in the first month of the season. They're behind the sticks. They're having penalties, so they're forced to, throw the ball down the field and do things that they aren't necessarily comfortable with. This game always felt like it was 2nd and 5 or 2nd and 6 or 3rd and 2. So they were able to stay in those big formations and where they didn't have to force Keon Coleman, Elijah Moore, Khalil Shakir, to win 8-10 yards down the field. So I do want to give credit for the big boys up front, James Cook, to make sure that this team always stayed ahead of the sticks and they were able to play to their strengths.
The one big knock I have, and we've talked about this a couple times before, I like that Joe Brady stays with things that work. And he had a counter lead run with Jackson Hawes and Reggie Gilliam that was working great early in the game. He kept going back to it so many times. Brian Baldinger tweeted about this. Now, Baldy, he's always a pro player guy, right? You're not going to get much criticism out of him. So he said, look at this play. It's awesome. They ran it 9 times. And the first 4 times it was. But my play-by-play chart going over this gets progressively angrier and angrier as the Bills continue to try and run this out. Now, give Brady credit. He was trying to do it with pulling offensive linemen instead of Jackson Hawes. He changed looks. He tried as many times as he could to run this play without showing that he was going to run this play, and the Chiefs knew exactly how to stop it. If Kansas City scores at the end of the game on that Hail Mary and then somehow wins in overtime, the number one underrated criticism I'm going to have is that they would not get off this play with a variety of things that they can do in the run game at the end of this contest against the Chiefs. Look, Joe Brady's been really good, but boy, it just drives me nuts when he continues to throw these plays out like 3 snaps after the Chiefs have proven, or other teams have proven, that they can stop it.
He reminds me of in Madden when I had like a play that works like a lot in the first quarter, and then you go to the tab that says recent plays and you just keep spamming it, and hopefully it works again late in the game. But then the user knows that it's coming. Sometimes it can feel like that, and I can relate to Brady on some type of level because I do it in the video games.
Quick hits on the rest of the offense, because like we said, there wasn't a whole lot that stood out, and I'll give you mine. You can give me a couple notes from your side as well. I thought Josh Allen was fine, not a spectacular game. The one throw to Elijah Moore, reading a blitz where a safety came down to take away the short hot and then going deep, was a great play. But other than that, pretty standard. Didn't do much to put his team in danger, which is fine. The thing that stood out blocking-wise, I thought Spencer Brown had a good game. I thought this was the best game the wide receivers had blocking all season long. Terrell Shavers, Khalil Shakir, even Keon Coleman had a really big block on a screen that sprung Shakir for a first down in the first half of this game. So it wasn't consistent. These guys don't block all the time. Great. But in this game, Shavers has been good for a while. Shakir and Keon really stepped up. What else for you kind of stood out with the Bills offensively against the Chiefs?
I thought that, and this goes to if they were able to meet again in the postseason, if there's one thing that I'm for certain will probably happen again, there is a mismatch up front. The Bills' offensive line is that much better than what the Chiefs provided on defense. I thought that the Chiefs' secondary is great, and the Bills they made sure that they didn't attack those guys in any way, shape, or form. I don't know how many plays that Trent McDuffie, Jalen Watson, Jaden Hicks were even involved in. So good on the Bills for taking advantage of the one clear weakness or 2 clear weaknesses on the Chiefs. So the big boys up front, and I guess everyone in the interior, right up the middle of the seams of that offense, I thought were the main reasons why they were able to win.
Chris Jones did make a few plays in this game. I remember seeing some people on social media saying, did Chris Jones even play? When you watched it back, there were certainly plays where he made his presence felt. So that doesn't mean that the offensive line played bad. I'm with you. I thought the O-line had a very, very solid game. Now the question comes. You and I have watched this. I think we've done at least the last 2, probably the last 3 Bills-Chiefs regular season games with this exercise. And then in the playoffs, and I'm thinking this as I'm going through this game, it always looks different for some reason. Things are better. One thing that did stand out to me is I thought Pat Mahomes played one of his worst games that I've ever seen. But in terms of this rivalry, Carl, when we talk about how this thing could happen again in January, how it might look, how much of what we saw in this game in November do we think reasonably gives Bills fans hope/optimism that if they meet again in January, the outcome will be different than it's been the last 4 times?
I got 2 things that will be the same, provided there's no catastrophic injuries. The Bills are that much better than the Chiefs up front on the offensive side of the ball. I think that is apparent. Chiefs fans, they left this game, and the biggest concern is that they had no pass rush. They didn't have a pass rush. Last week, the week before that, they've struggled, quite frankly, over the past few years of getting a running mate opposite of George Karlaftis. So I think if you're a Bills fan, the offense will look similar to that come postseason time. The one thing, and then also on the other side of the ball, I think Joey Bosa, if he is healthy, can do similar things in the postseason, because I know the Chiefs were without Josh Emmons in this game, and he's been fantastic this year. He's probably going to be an all-rookie at the end of the year. But the right tackle is still going to be there, Jawan Taylor. So I think if you're a Bills fan, he can duplicate that performance. Now, the one difference, and I'm just curious on how this works, how many tools and bags of tricks they have in their tool belt. The Bills play dime on, I believe, like 45% of their plays on defense. That is by far the highest rate that Sean McDermott's ever played. Not even close, in his own stratosphere. So I do wonder, did he throw out all the tricks in this matchup, and then now that the Chiefs have this on tape so they can maybe maybe they're more prepared for it in January? I don't know. But I do know that that's something that Steve Spagnuolo does, but it's usually in the postseason. How many times have we seen a Chiefs playoff game and we're like, oh man, Spags saved that for that moment. I mean, think about all the Bills games. I think of those 49er Super Bowls where it's like, oh, they saved that for this specific play. So I wonder, and I don't know, I'm not a coach, I'm not in the whiteboard with them, but there were so many wrinkles, what felt like playoff wrinkles. And I just wonder, do they have a wrinkle to the wrinkle come January?
And I have the same concern with the offense because if you go back through the Bills' scoring drives, they were all pretty much driven by one or, in one drive's case, two big pass plays where you're like, wow, that was great, and they did a good job, and they got 40 yards out of it. If you don't have that in the postseason, I have my doubts about whether or not the Bills can put up a high 20s number or a 30s number. They're still going to score 14, 20 points just because. But in this game, that was a concern for me. I brought up Mahomes. I thought he didn't play great. I think you'll see a better version, I think, in a potential January rematch. To your point, though, it feels like this secondary is going through a bit of a renovation here, that there are different players, different strengths, different ways they match up. And the fact that it's still in the foundation process or the construction process makes me wonder, the range of outcomes, I think, is pretty wide. It could work really, really well. And this could be a brand new, wildly athletic secondary, which in this matchup, we talk about, you say it all the time, styles make fights. In this matchup, that athletic secondary could be a real pain in the neck for these Chiefs receivers because, like you said, the primary driver of the defensive success was coverage down the field. How many times did we see Pat Mahomes drop back in this game and he had nothing? It felt like watching Josh Allen the last 5 or 6 weeks. He had to just scramble because there wasn't anything open down there, and that's a credit to what the Bills did when they played man. So I'm not going to say that's transferable, but it damn well could be because we don't know what the secondary could be, and I think the ceiling potentially is pretty high.
The pessimistic view is that, oh man, they threw everything, the kitchen sink at the Chiefs in this game plan. If you're a Bills fan, you can clap back and say, well, this is the first time we've had all these cast of characters together for a game, and we were still missing Taron Johnson. So I think we may find out in a few months, but nonetheless, it was a dominant performance Sunday night.
It was a type of game that restores your faith that the Bills can be an elite contender. They've got to prove it now week after week after week. You know, it's got to be Miami and Tampa and Pittsburgh and Houston, everybody else they play. We need to see this repeated over and over and over. All right, that's going to wrap it up for us here on Let's Talk Ball. Remember, you can see this show every single week on YouTube, on Spotify, on Rochester First, and on WIVB+. Heck of a game for the Bills. Now we just move on to the second half of the season. Dolphins next week. Carl and I will be back to talk about that one as well. So Carl Jones, I'm Thad Brown. Thanks very much for watching Let's Talk Ball. We will see you again next week talking about the Dolphins.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 on demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.